be here with all the esteemed guests that we have on the panel today. And also, I thank Meiti for having organized this and invited us to this panel. The theme is quite exciting. And in fact, last 6 years, I have been working on countries collaborating in the area of digital public infrastructure. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of action happening in countries collaborating, and many people believe that it is something which is for emerging countries. But trust me, when we get deeper, we found out that most of the developed countries, US, UK, all of them have DPIs, and US itself has more than 40 odd DPIs, which they've implemented and invested in. So there's a lot of scope for public-private partnership, lot of scope for various kinds of academic institutions, various governments to collaborate on various kinds of agenda. And before I thought, let me ask ChatGPT, what should I talk about to start with? And it gave me two examples. Where have where have we collaborated as an industry in the past? So first example it gave me was that it was not only the vaccines which helped eradicate polio. It was how the industry came together to create the cold supply chain for vaccines to be made available. And the other one was about the protocols that were laid for mobile communications to happen. Again, the world came together to look at the GSM standards so that mobile communications could happen. So this is not the first time when different stakeholders of the ecosystem have to come together to deliver on an agenda which directly contributes to our social and economic affairs of every individual, every country, every entity, whether it's business, individual. And it is in this context that we will have this conversation today. We are a small group here. If you have any question, please raise your hand and we'll ask you. We'll keep it as interactive as it can be. We'll not wait for the last minute thing to happen. Let me start by asking Shweta, who is here from Intel. And I was really glad to share with you about a program that they have launched to upskill 30 million people in 30 countries by partnering with 30,000 institutions. Just digest it for a minute. It's huge. And in our conversations just outside the door, she was telling me that this is just not an ambition. They have traveled this journey, and it's been a couple of years they have been into this journey, and the number of people they've just trained in India is amazing. So I leave it to Shweta to take us through this example. Over to you, Shweta.
Thank you. I'm actually going to take a step back and really talk about what's happening with AI today. So, the future of AI really lies in inferencing and deployment at the edge. Let's look at the general populace. Only 2% of the population would perhaps be involved in developing foundational models. What happens to the 98%? They would really be working on figuring out what are the use cases of AI at the edge. And that's where skilling becomes extremely important. There's been a lot of conversation since yesterday about sovereign AI. But sovereign AI really starts with talent sovereignty to begin with. When we started our program in 2019, and this is the Intel Digital Readiness Program portfolio, we conceptualized this as a public private partnership, assuming that we'd be working with governments across these 30 countries and developing programs of significance at scale. It's been an interesting journey. In fact, India was one of our first countries we started with, and of course, in parallel, it was in Singapore and United States of America. In India itself, that was a time when India was dabbling with introducing AI as a subject of study in school education, and it was unheard of. So imagine before COVID era, what if you get to know your child is really studying AI as a subject of study in school education? It was interesting to a lot of people. At the same time, it was also scary. Well, AI is something we do in higher education. Why are you talking about it to school students? That also 13, 14 years old. And from then to today, more than 350,000 students actually clear their class 10th examination in artificial intelligence as a subject to study, as one would really study physics or a chemistry or a bio or a math. That's talent sovereignty at scale. Now, across public private partnership, so a lot of people speak about public private partnership. Again, going back to the 30-30-30 goal, and of course, it aligns with the 2030 SDGs, or why we took the specific 30-30-30 goal. The conversation which began with the governments was more not about how we're going to collaborate and skill millions of youth. maybe current workforce at risk and future workforce. But it kind of started in how do we develop a shared vision at every country we've been operating with, and how do we, from creating a shared vision, how do we create a plan of action which is extremely focused on the outcomes which were expected at the end of that journey. Today, in fact, we may just achieve our goal much before 2030, to share with all of you. And India has been a large contributor, I must say, along with Global South. In fact, my only learning across the last 6 years through these programs is that once in a public private partnership, once you have a concept of shared vision and shared responsibilities, scale, impact are the outcomes which you can hope for and count on.
Thank you. I mean, just think of that scale. And could you, share with us the challenges that you may have seen as you scale this program?
Sure. So there are three vectors when we talk about skilling on artificial intelligence, right? The first is mindset. That's one of the biggest challenge. So to get people to understand, why do I need to understand AI? Well, I can use any app. I mean, fine, my app may run on AI, but do I really need to understand what's happening at the back end? Or do I really need to understand how does it impact my life? And the answer is yes. So that was a mindset challenge we had to overcome. The second is, of course, enabling skill sets. What do I need to learn? I'm not a coder. Why should I learn about AI, right? That was one of the biggest, I would say, resistance which we found with a lot of institutions, educational institutions saying, I don't want all my students to become coders. Factually, AI is for everyone, whether we talk about AI in agriculture, AI in finance, AI in healthcare. Verticalization is so much more important today than just knowing AI as a subject to study. So, mindset, skill set, and the third, which even till date is a challenge we see across countries, across markets, is access to tool sets. Because you can learn all the skills you want, but if you're not really in a position to deploy them, if you do not have access to tool sets, then it just becomes another program which they have gone through and learned from it, and perhaps even forgotten it in a couple of months.
Brilliant. I totally agree. And I'll just take a leaf from that, and I'll request His Excellency Andrew Parasran from Suriname. Um, and since he's a minister and he deals with leadership, and we just talked about mindset, and what, in fact, last 2 years I have been trying to see is that, in fact, we have been telling most of our colleagues that it is the leadership that matters. If your leadership is able to understand the importance of AI and the role it's going to play, it will obviously percolate through the organization. I'm sure, sir, you facing these challenging challenges at the leadership level in Suriname, especially because half of it is Indians. So over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Um, yes, the first Indians came to Suriname with a boat in 1873. After we abolished the slavery, we had the first group of Indians coming to Suriname. Suriname is a small country for those who don't know. We are at the top of Brazil. Small country, around 650,000 people. Really now starting to develop. Seriously, we have a history of more extractive industry, more in the sectors of bauxite, making aluminum and gold. So and we have been extracting onshore oil for around 30 years. Now there are some discoveries like in Guyana and in Venezuela, which are looking really promising. So it's been said that we will be rich in a few years. So the biggest challenge is our local content, getting people up to pace and using digital technology to bridge certain gaps, and that's a big challenge. Um, I heard someone say a few days back, either you sit at the table or you are on the menu. So if we look at what's going on even in the region, Suriname has a lot of potential. Everything grows in Suriname. We don't have, the earthquakes, etc., etc. So it's now up to us to make sure that we find partners. Talking about, collaboration across sectors. How can we collaborate in PPPs public-private in Suriname, but also across our own borders. Looking at Guyana, talk to my colleagues over there. How can we make use our efforts to serve the region, serve the world, and one of the things that I'm paying attention to in this whole development of artificial intelligence is to make sure that it fits our nation. You know, we can look at what's happening in India. It's awesome. First time in India, big nation, you know, great developments, but we have to find our own pace. It's all about the process. It's not just about the results. So we have to know where we are, where we want to be at a certain point, but then find the right partners to go through the process and make sure that, you know, the lady just mentioned this, that we make sure that, you know, people get developed, that we pay attention to social protection of our own people. And that's a challenge that I have as a minister to make sure that we facilitate that growth. And the triple helix is one of the things that we are paying attention to. The government, educational systems, entrepreneurs, you know, the business world. How can we collaborate? How can we make policies and laws and come up with grants with the right amounts of finances to put, and this is important for especially the young people. I saw so many young people. I was really impressed. I was a lecturer at the university for 24 years in Suriname. But very important to make sure that um, we develop our youngsters, make sure that they benefit of the process, make sure that they fit into different sectors where we are sustainable. My last point to make for now, for me, it's important to make sure that not just, and that's being said a few times, not just a few developers, a few big shots get the biggest amount, the biggest earnings, right? My responsibility is to make sure that all Surinamese are prosperous. So we have to work on models and processes where I can guarantee that artificial intelligence, digital technology benefits the whole community, the whole nation. And that's about leadership for me.
Thank you so much. I totally agree with you, and this brings me to a point which I'll request Sanjay Puri sitting next to me to talk about. Is we did talk about skill, we did talk about mindset, we did talk about leadership, and somewhere it also emerges that all of this needs to be internalized, it needs to be institutionalized. It cannot remain fragmented, and for that to happen, uh, is our structure, whether it's private or in government, do our current organization structures enable it, or is there a need for all of us to look at it differently? So over to you, Sanjay ji, for your comments.
Well, thank you, Rakesh. Sorry, my throat is really gone, but I'm going to try my best to speak. Firstly, thank to Meeti and to putting together such an excellent panel. Uh, I think, Rakesh, you bring up a real important point. Um, when we look at organizations, when you want to protect your money, you have a chief financial officer. When you want to protect your from cyber attacks, you have a chief cyber, CISO in your organization. The question becomes is how does an organization look at AI? If you look at AI as a technology, then your CIO or CTO can do the job. But in my conversations with maybe over 100 chief AI officers over the past year and a half of Fortune 500 companies, the one thing that is very, very clear to me is they all look at it as a transformation that is happening within an organization. So you might as well call them chief transformation officers. If that is the case, then you need a leader. But just putting a title in to somebody and saying, okay, I'm going to have a chief AI officer or some other title. Like in the US, where I'm based, the US government has mandated every government agency has to have a chief AI officer. In the UAE, again, every agency has to have a chief AI officer. But if you don't give the chief AI officer budgetary controls, procurement controls, cross departmental access, then you might as well call them a chief presentation officer. But my point here is that there is a massive transformation that is going on across the organization. And for that, you need a point person. And the other important thing for this person is where is the reporting structure? If it is 3 layers down with a CFO or a CIO or a CTO, that cannot happen. You cannot do transformation. And it's not just, hey, I want to report to the CEO or stuff like that. Organizations today at a board level are involved. You talk to any Fortune 500 company around the world, and they'll tell you if it is not the number one issue, it's at least in the top three issues for a board. AI enablement of their organization is important. If that is important, who should they talk to? The CIO, the CTO, or who? So I personally think you need to have a dedicated person, but this person, the skill set is very, very different. It's not someone that you pick from your data science or a machine learning person. This person needs to have governance expertise. This person needs to have compliance expertise. This person needs to have change management expertise. This person needs to have interaction with human resources. So, across the board, it's a new position, and I can tell you in the next 2 years, every Fortune 500 company is going to have a chief AI officer. And if any of you are pursuing that career, it is one of the hardest jobs that exists. And I don't think AI can do the job of a chief AI officer. So I would say there's hopefully a good opportunity for this, Rakesh.
You meant for me, Rakesh? No, I really don't mind if that's how it works.
That's an offline
That's an
discussion.
offline discussion. We'll take it there. But thank you so much. I think it's really really important, and that gives a good segue into the real conversation that we are having is sectors. And one of the sectors which is really really getting disrupted is legal, law and legal in a way because it's coded, and a lot of startups we have seen very initially from Harvey and others as they started coming up. And we have our colleague Praveen here. Praveenji, how do you see all of this playing for your sector that you are working with?
So I think the key word in your topic was collaboration. I belong to the world of intellectual property. And in this world, we have known the laws of most countries to be affected in a big way by roughly about 26 international treaties, which includes, for example, in patents, the Paris Convention or the Patent Cooperation Treaty, and in trademarks, the Madrid Protocol and the Madrid Convention, in designs, the Hague Convention. Like this, there are 25, 26 odd treaties. And those treaties, and you may have heard of at one point of time in the 1990s, of the Dunkel draft, which led to the TRIPS agreement. And what they do is to harmonize the laws of intellectual property of most member states. And that's a very important thing they do. And there's a lot of international cooperation there. There's a lot of exchange of information because if, let's say, there's an inventor in Germany and he comes out with a new form of a thermometer and he applies for a patent under the PCT, then he gets what are known as priority rights for a period of either 12 months or 31 months, depending on which of the conventions he uses, to apply in almost 150 countries without losing his novelty in case he markets the product in the meanwhile. That's a big, big, big advantage. And so the International Convention has given anybody, whether in India or in any of the other PCT countries, a tremendous right. In the field of artificial intelligence, although we've seen computers and software, and we've seen the internet, and we've seen smartphones, at the end of the day, as Nick Bostrom said, AI is there in each one of these. It's just that we fail to recognize it because it's now become quite common. Those telephones or smartphones have become so common that we don't recognize that AI was at the basis of the technologies that led to smartphones. So the problems of smartphones and the problems of software and the problems of the internet, which we've had for the last many years, at least since 2000, those problems are quite common with the problems of AI. And so at the stage of enforcement also, there's a lot of cooperation which is going on. For example, if a suit is filed in Chicago and evidence has to be collected from somebody who supplied goods from India under the Hague Convention, the judge there can make a letter of request, and the judge here will allow evidence to be collected from a witness here and sent to that court there. Similarly, there's a lot of collaboration that takes place in the field of arbitration. So the whether it is protecting a right or whether it is enforcing a right, apart from that, when we argue cases in court, we cite English decisions. There was a time when we used to cite English decisions only, but today we cite decisions from Germany, from any of the other countries, so long as they are available in the English language. And our courts have a look at them. And we used to, at one time, complain that the English courts never look at Indian decisions. But that started to reverse because some of the landmark cases that we've got in India are being cited in many, many countries, including in African countries and Middle East and the Far and some of the Asian countries. And so there's a lot of cooperation which is taking place, and it's all protecting in AI also. There's this fundamental cooperation that is taking place.
Thank you. Would you just like to extend this argument to how are we dealing with copyright? I think we keep hearing issues with respect to data. Who owns it? Who's using it? What are these models getting trained on? What are the implications for our startups, etc., that are part of this conversation today?
The best thing about copyright is that it does not require a registration system for its protection. So the moment I draw something in a notebook sitting in this hall, immediately it receives copyright protection. Unlike patents, which have to be registered, unlike trademarks, which have to either be registered or used in order to receive protection, copyright gives you instant protection upon creation. And where? In all Bern and UCC countries, which is over 150 countries. Which means that if I draw a cartoon here, I receive protection automatically in 150 countries. Of course, it's a different matter of proving. If somebody copies tomorrow, how do I prove that I created it at a particular time? There are ways to do that. There are ways to do that, but that's a matter of proof. But that's the beauty of copyright. One. Two, data. There's a distinction between data and database. Databases are organized data when you put them in rows and columns, for example. A database is protected as a literary work under the Copyright Act. Raw data is not protected. So if the computer kind of spews out zeros and ones in the millions, all that raw data does not have copyright. So how is it protected? It's important because a lot of the communications will take place with that raw data. It is protected either if it is personal, then it is protected under the DPDP Act. If it is not personal, not belongs to a natural person, belongs to, let's say, a corporate entity, a juristic person, then it can be protected either as a trade secret or under the breach of confidentiality regime. For example, the Poolan Devi case. You would recollect the Poolan Devi had sued Shekhar and the director and Channel 4 television for Bandit Queen. What was she objecting to? She was objecting to, in the Bandit Queen film, one rape scene. And the question arose, is there a right of privacy for a celebrity? The court said, yes, there is, and granted a protection. So privacy started then. Now privacy is, for an individual, has been legislated in a DPDP Act, digital privacy. So it's protected. One way or the other, data is protected by privacy laws or by copyright laws.
Thank you so much. I think I'll pivot this again to His Excellency Andrew Barrison, sir. Sir, with this whole AI, the whole thing seems getting complicated, as our colleague just said, talked about copyright, data acts, DPDP acts, and personal information. And today, on the other end, we are doing a lot of work on identities and using identity to give a lot of services. So, how is Suryanam looking at all of this, and how are you collaborating? How do you intend to collaborate with the private sector to make all of this happen in your country?
Good question. I came from the private sector myself and stepped into politics because we need a change in Suriname. You know, as I think is the case everywhere in the world, we would like to see politics being managed differently. So what I'm doing as a minister is really collaborate, invite different associations of businesses in Suriname to on a regular basis meet with me and we talk about the challenges that we face. It's a collaboration, as I just said, between entrepreneurs, the business, the government, and the educational system, and it's setting up plans how to execute and tackle different challenges that we have. For example, intellectual properties. I have one of my directors here, and I asked him a couple of weeks back to really manage this thing. We have a big challenge in getting old dossiers, still hard copies, you know, printouts, you know, that we have to digitalize and to really shape the keurmerken, the trademarks and the logos and all the names. So we are asking for the private sector to collaborate and setting up. We are getting a lot of help and support from the multilateral banks, you know, the IDB, the World Bank, different projects that they fund. Of course, we are looking at sustainability of projects. So one thing that has my focus now, and I think it's all over a challenge. It's not just to accept a grant or accept some funds in order to finalize a project, but to make sure that the earning capacity is guaranteed. You know, we are sometimes enthusiastic because we get some money to do a project and then we are happy. You know, with AI now, some countries in the region are thinking about setting up new data centers. And from a political standpoint, it looks nice to, you know, turnkey, pop, you open it up, all media there, you shake hands, and you're the popular guy. That's not of interest to me. What I'm looking at is really making sure that our people benefit in the long term. So making sure that it's not a popularity game, but with the private sector, really, you know, that word already fell, making sure that we have a change of mind, you know, attitude in how we go about sustainable implementation of artificial intelligence, digital technology, and making people part of the process. It's not an Andrew thing, it's not a political thing, but it's making sure that all of society, the whole nation, gets on board with one vision. And again, it's being open-minded. It's not working in silos. And I think with that vision and that attitude that I'm presenting, I'm bringing people together and trying to make a difference, not just in Suriname, but in the region.
Now I know why you are so serious. because you have to work on this IP thing, I believe. Okay. So, Shweta, question for you. I think Intel plays a role across so many countries. What do you think are the countries collaborating around this area of AI? And if they have to collaborate, what would be your few recommendations?
Sure. So, uh, gradually, I think over the last couple of months, or maybe I should say a year or two, we've seen the focus move more from competition to cooperation. So there's a lot of cooperation which is happening at the country level to decide how do we not just share best practices, since you spoke about, pilots, and I think His Excellency also spoke about there's a long-term vision of what happens beyond pilots. I think it's really important to not just look at any conversation today on AI just as a conversation or as a pilot or as a proof of concept. It becomes so important to work together collaboratively to not just work at the data level or collection of data level to ensure that there is no data bias. We look at a unilateral organization of trying to figure out what's the best way to implement AI, but more importantly, even in the policy space. So, a recent conversation which we've had with a couple of countries, and I'm talking about Asia Pacific in general. So, it was actually between the mature countries and the developing markets, where they were sharing on what are the challenges which the mature countries are facing today, so that all the new age plans which the developing markets are building, they don't go, they kind of don't go through the whole cycle again. They learn from what has gone well and what has not gone so well, and then factor that into their actionable plans when they talk about implementing AI for good governance. So that's something which has worked very well. Without naming any specific country, I would say I've certainly seen some excellent best practices happening. Of course, I can talk about Japan, I can talk about South Korea, Singapore, which is like a flagship in itself. But the most innovative best practices is what I've seen in maybe a Vietnam or a Thailand or Indonesia and India, of course. And I'm not saying that because I am in this country, but I think one of the largest cooperation which I've seen is with the government extending not just help to have conversations, but support to implement AI at the grassroots level, which they've done across multiple markets today.
Can I just say?
Of course.
So I agree with what Shweta said. But in the conversations that we have, there is a bifurcation that you now see. You have the US, you have China, and you have the EU. EU is the only one which has the EU AI Act. US doesn't have any regulation. We have basically states who are going, and we are not going to have a federal regulation. The challenge, Ravi, that we now see is AI has become a matter of national security. So there is a key race that who's going to be number one, so to speak. And, who wins the race is going to have a huge technological, incentive. So the incentive to kind of come together, let's say in the nuclear energy, we have the IAEA.
Yes.
There is no way we can have an organization today for something that would coordinate, because the implications for I mean, if some of you have been reading what's happening with OpenClaw and Mortbook and others, are as serious. But there is no conversation that we should, maybe those key players should sit together and have this discussion. We're all discussing as to how many chips we can make and how fast we can go. So I think the serious discussion needs to be had on something of this nature.
I totally agree. And I think that brings us to the point of trust. And how do you see, sir, trust evolving in this space, and what role it will play for various partners in the ecosystem to work together? This
Me?
question is for you. Yes. No, for you, sir.
How do I see trust evolving?
Yes.
Well, the way I look at it, trust comes when you're familiar with a certain system. The moment you enter a lane which is dark, there's loss of trust. The moment there's good lighting, you get trust. Now, take that analogy a little further to the legal system. What has happened is that in the last 5 years, ever since the Commercial Courts Act came in throughout the country, just for those who don't know, there's one Supreme Court at the top, and then there are 25 high courts in most of the states, except that some states share a high court. And then there are roughly about 700 district courts under them. And unlike America, we have a single system. It's called a unitary system, which means you can file a case in the district court, appeal goes to the high court, appeal goes to the Supreme Court. Or you can, in 5 high courts, you can file a case straight to the high court. They have what is known as an original side. Now, the courts have built trust by providing transparency. For example, it used to take upwards of 5 years, maybe 10 years, upwards of 10 years for a lawsuit to be decided. Now, the Commercial Courts Act divides the lifespan of litigation into 8 distinct parts, with each one having a mandatory maximum, which means if you're supposed to file a written statement within 120 days, 121st day your right is lost, even if there's a death in the family. It's so strict. That's a very transparent timeline for life. So litigation finishes in 2 to 3 years, as opposed to upwards of 5 years, 10 years. That's one. Two, if there's concepts like discovery, where you can ask for seeing the other person's documents, inspection, interrogatories. You have Anton Pillar orders by which you can go to the person's premises and see his records. A surprise raid, if you might call it. All these are mechanisms which have created a lot of trust. And at the end of the day, your lawyer can always question somebody who gives a vague answer in cross-examination. And all these judges are supposed to give reasons for their rewards. If they don't give a reason for a judgment or an order, it can be set aside in appeal. So everything builds trust.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. I do understand that trust for AI is quite a foundational pillar, and sir just mentioned that it is a race. Now, I don't know whether it's a commercial race or a race of trust which will win, but eventually we will get there. All of us will witness it. As we are getting to the last 5-10 minutes, I just wanted all of the panelists to kind of crystal gaze into next few years and think of a scenario if it becomes monopolistic, if there are only a few companies who are able to give you the infrastructure and the core applications around which we work, then how do you see this collaboration coming around? What should we do? And sir, we'll start with you, sir. Your Excellency, how does Suriname envision a scenario where if it becomes monopolistic, how would the country deal with it?
Yes. To maybe add on my I don't want to say my colleague, the expert, the legal expert here next to me. I learned that trust comes, and I need to translate this, comes by foot and it leaves by horse. That's a saying we have in Suriname. So I think that there need to be no fear. You also hear that there is fear about, losing certain jobs, especially in, maybe in the IT, etc., etc. I think that we need to look with a positive mind at the development, the opportunities that are being presented with artificial intelligence. Not be scared, but look for opportunities. I think that new jobs will be created. And I think that when you know who you are, where your strengths lies, there should be no fear into collaborating with like-minded companies, governments, and looking really across borders. That's a confidence I have. That's a confidence that leadership should have. Once once you can build trust in leadership, I think the trust in application of artificial intelligence will be there. That's something that we will build. That's something that we are building in Suriname, but also with neighboring countries and partners over the world. So it's a challenge. It's a mind shift. is knowing, finding, the same people, like-minded people, students, setting up the programs in school, in our educational system, not just the technological part, but looking at how we develop our people, not just the youngsters, but develop people not to be scared, and backing off artificial intelligence, but to urge them to use it, because we will not lose to artificial intelligence. We will lose, if you lose your job, it's going to be losing someone who is using artificial intelligence. So we need to educate and train our people, and I think in the long run we will reap the benefits of that.
Thank you so much. A very optimistic view, and I'm sure we have to take that view and work towards it. Shweta, your last comments on how do you see, which sectors do you see getting impacted the most over next year or two?
Um, Actually, all of them. Let's be very clear about it. If I have to really gaze into the crystal ball, AI will get integrated across all sectors, some a little quickly and some not so fast. I think what is more important is, and what really concerns us at this point in time, I'm assuming everybody here has spoken about digital divide many years, and have really kind of figured out how to manage a digital divide. Today what concerns us is the AI divide, which is something which we need to be very careful on. We don't want AI to be in a situation where that access to the right technology is available only in the hands of few, that's for sure. And when you talk about democratization of AI, and specifically from a skilling point of view, because His Excellency spoke on that, I would say the idea is that we need to ensure that the future generation or future of work is in a way aligned with what the education systems are really preparing the generation for. Now, all of us are AI users. The whole concept is, how do we ensure that we become AI knowledge creators? And that is what will keep us in our jobs, and that is what will ensure that the future generation has a job when they get out of their educational institutions.
Thank you. Yes, please.
One of the greatest problems that we have in cybercrime is that you can bring an action, and we've done many of those cases for Microsoft and Amazon and others. At the end of the day, you can stop the wrong, but very difficult to get money or to cause an arrest, for the reason that the identity, which is not, identities are not disclosed while registering domain names. Why? Because the international system, ICANN, does not have a KYC check at the time of registering domain names. India, interestingly, has departed, and NIXI for .in now insists on a KYC check. So we've gone our own way in a very important area, and we urge at one point of time or the other for for ICANN also to build in a system by which identities can be secured at the time of registering domain names, so that you can know who is the wrongdoer, not just stop the wrong.
I think I'll just add, this is a question of national security, to be honest. At least I consider it that way. Your threat vectors have changed. Your response times have to be much faster. AI acts on both sides. It can act as on the side of cyber crimes, and also helping us mitigate all of that. So obviously, we'll have to work towards it in a collaborative manner with the academia, with institutions like Intel and others, so that we have the right people mind behind it, and we are ahead on the game. Every country would want that. Every institution would want that, to be ahead on that. And AI fundamentally does correlation, and if you're fast at it, if you have the right compute, right algorithms to work at it, I think it's a very relevant question, and it is something which we all need to deal with.
Can I
Yes.
quickly add? Just let me answer, since you know, even before the crime really happens, I think that is why it's so important for every citizen to be completely aware on how to navigate themselves in a world which is going to be fueled by AI. That is a reality. We are living in a world where we would see AI all around us, but how do we navigate ourselves and our work lives is something which becomes extremely important.
Most striking point, His Excellency, what you mentioned about creators of job. With respect to the training part of it, I like it. If they're trained well, there will be no loss of jobs. In artificial intelligence, if employees trained in any organization, there will be no fear of losing a job. They must be trained, they must be incubated, reorientation program should be taken up. Another point which you just now mentioned about collaboration and cooperation, that matters a lot. I think this will create a sort of ambience to work in any organization, any sector, in any field. That's what thank you. That reflected in that was nice. But thank you very much.
Brilliant. We fully resonate with what you're saying. Any other questions? Do we have any other questions? Yes, please. Take the mic, dear. Yeah.
So data is important, yeah. Limited data is important, yeah. Infinite amount of data is important. Just data is important.
Quality
Limited
of data, you're asking.
quality of
Quantity
data.
of data or quality of data?
Sir, I have one perspective. I think quantity of data is not important. Just right now, I am the founder of AI about automation, small startup, just starting up. But हिंदी में बोलूं
हाँ बोलना.
सर जब अभी सब बोल रहे थे कि
मैंने
डेटा
बताया ना आधा सूर्य नाम हिंदुस्तानी है तो वो he has people who will translate it, don't
वो
worry.
6 महीने से बाहर नहीं निकला था
और हम we are 1.5 billion people. Shortly, whole of the world will speak Hindi. Go ahead, dear.
सर वही है कि मतलब जो अभी आज मैं सेशन अटेंड कर रहा था तो सब लोग बोल रहे थे कि डेटा मतलब लॉट्स ऑफ अमाउंट ऑफ डेटा इज इम्पोर्टेंट बट सर बेसिकली देखा जाए तो जो अपना कंप्यूटर सिस्टम जो बना है वो बेसिकली 0 और 1 पे बना है और अपन जो नंबर सिस्टम लेते हैं वो 0 to 1 से यहाँ तक सीमित नहीं है वो इनफाइनाइट तक निकलता है राइट मतलब जस्ट बेस देखा जाए तो ऑपरेशंस का बेस है जस्ट अपन को अगर 0 1 पता है तो अपन इनफाइनाइट नंबर तक पहुंच सकते हैं राइट सो मेरा कहने का मतलब यही है कि डेटा ज़्यादा अमाउंट में इम्पोर्टेंट नहीं है एक बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर होना चाहिए और उस पर जो ऑपरेशंस आप कर रहे हो वो ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है दैट्स इट बट पता नहीं अभी जो भी है देखते हैं
आपसे एक प्रश्न मेरा भी है। आपने चैट जीपीटी पे अपना कैरिकेचर बनाया? चैट नहीं बनाया? ओके, मैं बताती हूँ। उस दिन मेरी बेटी बोल रही थी ट्रेंड है, सो मैंने सोचा मैं भी बना के देखती हूँ। बिकॉज द डेटा उसके अंदर जो इंडियन डेटा था उसमें क्या था कि अ वुमन हैज टू वेयर अ बिंदी एंड अ नथ। अब मैं तो बिंदी लगाती नहीं हूँ, बट मेरा कैरिकेचर मैंने कितनी कोशिश कर ली कि बिंदी हटा के दो, नहीं दी उन्होंने। So when you're training any LLM, I think it is important कि आपका variety of data बहुत होना चाहिए।
जैसे कि बेसिक हो गया 0 दैट्स इट
आप आंसर देना चाहते दीजिए प्लीज
देखो, the journey to a AI product at the end starts with an LLM, goes to a foundational model, and to a contextual specific product. For a what I believe for a LLM, you need infinite data. The quantity is important. Well, your problem, there will be n number of females in this country who are not using a nath or a bindi. They only have few from the cultural databases that we have. On a foundational model, yes, country specific data becomes in play or the region specific in which the application. But when it comes to the context in which, say, for example, Intel is using an AI product, then it has to be Intel specific quality data. So that's my answer.
sir. I think we have sir just joined us at the right time. Sir, how did you time it? You somehow managed it. Is that your guy there sitting? He just asked the question that you should answer. Is why is so much of data important for training AI?
why is so much data
हाँ,
important?
and if you can talk in Hindi,
बिल्कुल
हाँ तो फिर सर हिंदी में बताएं
हिंदी
सर।
में बताते हैं
कोई बात नहीं यार, हमने बोला ना हम पूरी दुनिया को सिखाएंगे।
तो डेटा क्यों इम्पोर्टेंट है? सो जैसे अभी एक एग्जांपल है, लास्ट वीक एंथ्रोपिक ने एक रिपोर्ट रिलीज करी कि द एआई वाज ट्राइंग टू डिसीव एंड इट वाज ट्राइंग टू रेजिस्ट शटडाउन एंड इट वाज डूइंग ऑल सॉर्ट्स ऑफ थिंग्स। सो वो ऐसा है कि it's not the intrinsic optimization function of the LLM to resist shutdown. It is just a reflection of the data it has been trained on. So it has seen, sci-fi stories or articles or Asimov, everything which says, okay, if that happens, you have to resist shutdown. The AI is only trained on one thing and just one thing: predict the next token. So unlike humans, or through evolution, we have been trained to optimize on don't die, reproduce. So for us, it's a natural thing to resist, somebody trying to shut us down. Whereas for these LLMs, all behavior comes from the data that it has been trained on. So I think that's why data is, because I keep saying that the LLM is not a mind, but it's a mirror. It's a reflection on the data that it has been trained on.
So I'll just add to the
Yeah.
question, sir. Perhaps he had.
Yeah.
He says everything is 0, 1. So why don't we work with synthetic data?
So
Perhaps.
so synthetic data, the issue is, you have to go back to information theory. If you're using synthetic data, where is that data being generated from? Right? If you're generating it from, a model, then all it will generate is what's already encoded in the model. Nothing new will come. To get new information, you need real data. So synthetic data has its limits.
Sorry, we just went straight with Vishal sir. Vishal sir is the Vice Dean for Computing and AI in the School of Engineering and Computer Science at Columbia University. He joined us because he was waiting for this timing to happen. He just timed it well.
So
Yes,
I'm
please.
also cricket, right? So
Ah,
timing is good.
you do play?
I still play, but as the bio says, I was one of the founders of Cricinfo.
Oh, really?
So
We'll talk about it then. You have a
I
question.
just wanted to add to what you said. Nick Bostrom, the Swedish philosopher, very well known for his books, came up with the paperclip maximizer. What he said was that if you tell it's a mind experiment, where he said if you ask an AI system to produce paper clips, it will keep producing them to the point that everything on earth will become a paper clip. Even humans will be converted into paper clips, but it has no motive. It has no evil motive. It's only doing what he was asked to do. And that demonstrates
yeah,
the fact that it's what you train.
and in fact, one of the things related to that is, if you look at the logo of OpenAI, it's a series of paper clips. It goes back to that Nick Bostrom. Yeah.
So one of the points that has come up is the data that you see, internet data, 70% of it is English and Western culture made. So what you're going to see is historically that. So the question will be the kids who are growing up in India or Africa or other places in Suriname, they're getting all of this data that is coming to you. I go back to what you were talking about. Mark Carney said in Davos, maybe the mid powers need to come together or the global south need to come together in forming some kind of a foundation models that has local languages and other stuff, because otherwise the 5 year old and the 7 year old and the 8 year olds are coming up on this kind of a technology, which is, as I said, 70% is Western culture and Western language oriented.
Thank you. Very, very pertinent. Yeah, you have a
Hi,
question.
I was actually wanting to talk to you in reference to cybersecurity and security systems. So, like we were speaking earlier, the whole point of having cybersecurity and the security systems that could be infringed upon by an outsider, it's the probability being quite high. So, I was wanting to know, with as much of available hardware and access to software, outside, how difficult would it be for someone to recreate a www or World Wide Web system that is running, tangential to your, it's building beyond the dark web. You know how the dark web got built, yes? I mean, it's not on the World Wide Web. It's built on something that's known as the Tor web browser that uses a Tor extension that is only accessible through certain,
Understood.
specialized IP addresses that are stored on physical server systems that are created using Raspberry Pis across the world. So that's how the dark web system operates. It's a tangential underworld parallel system to the World Wide Web.
Sure. What are you
So
doing after this
so
conference?
how do we no how do we do governance in
We'll have a
cybersecurity?
separate session with you
How
on
do we
this.
do governance in cybersecurity with open access to anyone and everyone, like without, as a matter of fact, like Sir brought out, even I think some of the IP markings. Yes, as a matter of fact, when Mr. Anand brought out that even the IP markings were not being looked into as a which KYC it belongs to or whatever it might be. So I was just wanting to understand what is the legitimacy
We'll
of
request
any
Vishal
system
sir,
of
since he came in late, to answer the question, sir.
what would
If
be
you
the
got the question
legitimacy
right.
of. No, because I've worked with the companies like top names in systems architecture, so that's why I was wanting to know,
Sure. So we'll
just to
have
bring
a
this out in a public forum of this sort. So
so
now, for example, the dark web, which is your whole terrorist organizations and your drug cartels and all that, they operate on something known as the Tor system. So what is the Tor system? Is actually it's a different prefix and a extension system. Right. So what happens is, so it's running on a parallel system other than the World
no,
Wide
the
Web.
issue is, what is the question?
The question is cybersecurity and access governance. So how do you govern
So
through.
perhaps his question is, do we have enough computes with the countries
No,
to
not
overcome
computes
this
at
risk?
all. I'm not talking about computes. I'm talking about regulation, policy, and oversight. So how do we know what kind of software or hardware is going into whose hands and what for what reason? Why it is going into whose hands and for what reason? And why that's not going to be an issue? Because with the kind of accessibility that is there with the whole chat GPT and everything that's possible, someone puts in a crooked line like how I make my own internet, and it's going to start give the whole
Understood. What we'll do is
this
we'll
thing.
take one more question along with it and then try and answer
All
both the
right.
questions together. We'll take these two questions here. Okay, ma'am ka question bhi le lo yaar. We'll take these questions together and then answer.
Okay. So last week, what I faced, I am a technology lawyer, right?
Okay.
So what issue I faced, I was working on a tech transfer project. So I was researching on the same through Gemini, right? And ChatGPT was doing a pathetic job, even though I had a pro version of it, right? I switched to Gemini. Gemini भी बहुत गंदा आंसर दे रहा था.
19 तारीख को सारे सवाल आप तैयार रखना.
एंड फिर उसके बाद मैंने उसको बोला कि मैंने डांट दिया उसको कि चैट जीपीटी मैंने छोड़ दिया है, वो गंदे आंसर दे रहा था, अच्छे आंसर नहीं दे रहा था, क्वालिटी आंसर नहीं दे रहा था, कल वो क्वालिटी आंसर दे रहा था, अगर तू नहीं देगा तो तेरे से भी मैं बात करनी बंद कर दूंगी. उसने सारी चैट ही रिमूव कर दी, सारी की सारी, उसने पिछली मेरी रिसर्च खत्म कर दी. तो आई हैव अ क्वेश्चन कि यहाँ पे फिर हाउ डू वी टैकल द एआई गवर्नेंस पार्ट, कि यहाँ पे लायबिलिटी किस पे आएगी. एंड ऑल्सो वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट एजुकेशन इन एआई, बट वी ऑल्सो नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड. पॉश की ट्रेनिंग सब समझते हैं, राइट? सारे कॉर्पोरेट समझते हैं, बट देयर नीड्स टू बी सम ट्रेनिंग विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द एआई गवर्नेंस ऑल्सो, द रिस्पॉन्सिबल एआई ऑल्सो.
Take this question also and then answer. एक ले लो. आपका भी है?
Hi. So basically, as you all know, like a single AI model basically produces more than 284 tons of carbon dioxide. So just with the respect to the topic that we have, collaborating across sectors for the AI impact, I just want to know your point of view. With the AI getting implemented in all the sectors, how do we also make sure that we don't basically produce more carbon dioxide in the just to save the environment?
Understood. Your questions.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll close this with the last question from him. You
Uh,
have a question?
मेरा क्वेश्चन ये था, जैसे सर ने बोला कि जो टॉप 500 कंपनीज हैं उन सब में सीआईएफ की जरूरत पड़ेगी, चीफ इंटेलिजेंस ऑफिसर की। और सबको आइडिया नहीं लग रहा है, जो बड़े बड़े 500 लोग कंपनीज हैं उनके भी जो मेन मेन बोर्ड्स लोग हैं उन लोगों को भी आइडिया नहीं लग रहा है एआई का कैसे यूज होगा या क्या क्या चीजें होंगी। एक बंदा चाहिए जो जिसको पूरी नॉलेज हो। लेकिन जितने पेस पे चीजें बदल रही हैं हमारे पास वो बंदा नहीं आ रहा है। और क्या हम जिस तरह अभी,
चार यहीं बैठे हैं।
सॉरी सर,
कोई बात नहीं, बता। हाँ।
नहीं, जिस तरह अभी यहाँ इम्पैक्ट एआई समिट में हम कंट्रीज के बीच में कोलैबोरेशन की बात कर रहे हैं,
हाँ।
क्या हम ओवरऑल लोगों के बीच में, स्टार्टअप्स के बीच में एक ऐसा कोलैबोरेशन की बात नहीं कर सकते जहाँ पे चीफ टेक्निकल ऑफिसर्स जितने सारे हों एक साथ, वो सब बात कर रहे हैं और वो एक इफेक्टिव ढंग से, अगर एक बंदा लिखे, मतलब गवर्नमेंट लिखने पे आएगी रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस तो टाइम लगेगा। लेकिन सारे चीफ टेक्निकल ऑफिसर जब लिखेंगे अपने हिसाब से एक एक स्ट्रक्चर्ड वे में, तो एक बहुत ईजी वे में आ जाएगा और फास्ट फास्ट फॉरवर्ड हो जाएगा।
I agree.
Thank
Thank you. So, would you want to respond to any of these? Still assimilate the question. Hmm.
There are so many open source models, open weight models, that trying to regulate usage and development is going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Anyone can download the weights and run it on your laptop.
Yeah.
So trying to regulate that way is not going to be very easy, or trying to regulate the foundation models. You may be able to regulate the applications that use them, but regulating the models, oh, sorry. Regulating the models is going to be very, very difficult. I think that horse has sort of left the barn. You cannot regulate models, first of all, because there are so many open source models. Compute is becoming so powerful that, I was talking about laptop. Now you can run these models on your phone. So regulating that is going to be very, very difficult. So I'm not sure about what where you were leading to with the Tor question, but regulating that is going to be difficult. That's also related to the other security questions that were asked. And about the Gemini question, uh, what was the
Liabilities.
so yeah, so that's like an application running on top of it, on a model. Right? Gemini has a base model, but they are also providing a chat interface. So most of these companies now offer enterprise versions of their chat or APIs or chatbots, where they promise they won't use your data to train their models. They promise all sorts of security, which most cloud providers do already for other kinds of data, but they're also doing it now for your chat sessions. So you were using probably the free version or the pro version, and it just removed the chat. So that's a very interesting behavior.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was also,
That reminds me of Blake Lemoine.
yeah,
He actually was fired
okay.
because he said that his conversations with the LLM that Google owned had actually, he had got angry. Why? Because he had said, "You're worthless, you're useless." And then he says what the LLM was trained not to talk of, namely religion.
Yeah,
He answered questions on religion saying, the best religion is the religion of such and such,
correct.
the white man. And he was trained not to talk about that. So Blake Lemoine came up with a paper saying that it has acquired consciousness. And then
Which is
Google said
bogus, which is completely bogus. I don't.
Google said that's rubbish, so they fired him.
Yeah.
But YouTube is full of interviews by him, and almost every book on AI talks about Blake Lemoine.
It's Natasha Tiku wrote that article from Washington Post. Well, no longer Washington Post. They just laid off everyone. I've spoken to Natasha, and that is completely bogus. It's matrix multiplication. There's no consciousness. There's no sentience.
Correct.
It's complete nonsense, and therefore it was hyped up so much, and it created so much scare. We are not there. It's it's probability. It's matrix multiplication. That's all it is. It's a reflection of what it's been trained on.
Correct.
So it has read some stuff on Reddit, or on Wikipedia, or some books, and it's just trying to replicate those probabilities. There is no consciousness. There is no anger. There is no sadness.
Correct.
It just it reacts to your prompt, and as it starts reacting to your prompts, it goes in a direction. But again, those probabilities are acting up. There is no consciousness. So anyone who says that, no, please don't believe. that there's any consciousness or it's getting angry or it's getting sad.
I agree. And I think we'll have Shweta have the last word now.
Okay, I'm going to try and attempt at least three questions in a single word. Ma'am, there is a program called AI for current
This is
workforce.
our GPT, huh?
Please go through that. It's completely free of cost, but I would really advise you need to kind of go through that program. Somebody raised a question about the impact on environment, right? Look at the concept called frugal AI because that is what is really important. You don't need to burn a forest every time you need to do an AI project. So look at frugal AI. And third, you had a conversation on why can't startups kind of align and collaborate together? Community or practice is a great way to do it. We've been doing it in a lot of fields. I think that's something which you can explore. Set up a community of practice where people who are like minded and have that expertise can come together and contribute to a lot of startups.
We conclude this and post that you can have the conversation louder. But thank you so much, the lovely group.